Welcome back to another Leadership Blueprints. I'm your host, BJ Kraemer, and we've had a few of these episodes where we actually go outside of the built environment, but very much inside the leadership environment, talking to coaches. And today I'm talking with Paul Donovan, who's the CEO and head coach of Jersey Wahoos, a USA swimming club program located here in Mount Laurel, New Jersey, and a club that's very near and dear to my heart. I grew up swimming there. A lot of my success in the pool and frankly outside of the pool stems from, I think, lessons learned at through youth sports and in particular through swimming at Jersey Wahoo. So excited to dig in as you hear me talk about all the time. One, upon the fields of friendly strife are sown the seeds that upon other fields on other days will bear the fruits of victory. And all of the lessons that we learn by going through hardships, struggle on the sports field, in the swimming pool, and the character that we build for ourselves. The very first time I heard Paul Donovan speak, he used the terminology, two phrases that stuck with me. He was the first coach I ever heard talk about becoming the best version of yourself, and the first person I ever heard talk about creating a safe place to fail. And when I asked Paul, like, hey, where should we start with the conversation? The first thing he thought about was self-compassion. So I'm going to start there. And to me, as I was like thinking about, I'm like, I talk about lead yourself first a lot when it comes to leadership development. And I want to get your take, Paul, on what do you mean by self-compassion?
Well, I think, when it came to my mind, it came to my mind first about the kids that we're working with and that we're dealing with. So, in our world at the Wahoos, it's, kids from the age of, 6 to 18. It's when they finish high school, they graduate on out of the program. And really the kids that are heavily invested, in the sport kind of from the age of 10 up to when they graduate high school. And the biggest thing I see, the most common trend that we see amongst all the kids is that they're just so hard on themselves. They are under a huge amount of pressure. And, if we as the adults in the room, the coaches, the parents, everyone that's involved, the teachers in their day-to-day, that pressure can turn into stress. And stress is not a positive thing at any stage of our lives, let alone in a young person's development. So I think, that biggest thing I see is trying to teach them how to be kind to themselves, how to give themselves props and big themselves up because they do amazing things. The kids that we're lucky enough to work with are, they're not normal, and they're pretty amazing young people for the commitment and the maturity levels and just everything that they do. But the biggest thing that we see is they're just so hard on themselves. They're their own harshest critics, and trying to get them to see the good in what they do, to see the special in what they do, I think is a really important life skill that they learn how to, celebrate the little wins that they achieve on a regular basis, and that they use that, kindness to themselves to build their confidence, to build their self-belief. And it's just such an important thing. And as the leaders in that environment, we can impact that by almost filling in the gaps and showing them that compassion first. And hopefully, if they hear it from us enough, they will also learn how to see it in themselves.
You almost have to be that voice when they're not. I think of it as all of the voices that we have inside of our head saying, not enough, do more, you could have done better, whatever. You have to be that external voice, building up that internal voice to be more positive.
Absolutely, because as I said, and also there's so much negative criticism out there. And not maybe even direct criticism, indirect criticism through social media, through seeing what their peers are doing. Comparison. And so we have to fill that void. And I think if we just keep telling them that they are great, because they'll do things that they think aren't good enough. And the reality is, in the moment, they were exactly what was needed. And sometimes, a lot of the time, we need to be able to point that out to them so that they can look at it with maybe a little bit of a clearer mind. And like we are trying to help these kids, because of what they're involved in, probably be a bit ahead of their just average peer group out there. But that's one of the benefits of being involved in competitive youth sport as well. So we're maybe trying just to speed up that process of them being able to look at themselves and just feel good around the basic things that they do day in, day out is just so important.
So talk to us about when you're trying to hold a high standard and you're trying to create accountability, how do you do it without creating that pressure?
It's interesting. I think in so many things in the world are viewed through a black and white lens. And the reality is that most of the world operates in the gray.
Yep.
So two things can be true at the same time, and two opposite things can be true at the same time. So I think it's not about doing one or the other. It's actually about doing both, but doing them at the right time and doing it appropriately and communicating it appropriately as well. So, and also we are involved in youth sport. They're young children, like 18 years of age. I don't know about you.
Yeah.
I was still a moron until I was at least 30. So these guys are actually in the time of their lives where they are meant to be making mistakes on a daily basis. And that's okay. So I think you've got to put it in context of the environment that you're working within as well. Would I have the same approach in my previous role? I worked in a high performance system for the national governing body back in Ireland. Very different level of accountability. If I was working, I think in the collegiate world or in pro sport, very, very different level of accountability. And we've got to be careful that although we admire and we look up to and we take great lessons out of those teams and those operations, that we're dealing with young people.
Yeah.
And we're meant to be bringing them on a journey to get to the point that if they choose to go down that path, that they've got the skills to be able to do it. We are not the finished product. So I think part of that, how do we find those two things, is because I think we start with the compassion piece first and building them up. And the accountable bit is just the teaching moments along the way. And you can never be afraid to tell them when they're wrong.
Yeah.
Because I think that's one of the other great disservices that goes on, I think, in today's world, is people are afraid to say no and people are afraid to tell people when they're wrong. Our job is to tell them when they're wrong. We just don't want them to feel
like failures because of it.
But they can feel like they failed in the moment,
right.
But they are not a failure.
Right.
And it's trying to get that communication piece right. And I think that's the balance that we try to, the path we try to walk when we're dealing with the kids on a daily basis.
I love that you brought in the fact that it's not pro sports, it's not collegiate sports, it is youth sports. And I think you have more stakeholders in youth sports than those other ones in terms of, and in particular in swimming, where you're not coaching a team, you're coaching a bunch of individuals inside of a team. They all have their different path, different trajectory. They also all come from different parents. And the other thing that you've always been very empathetic and understanding that parents are advocating for their child. It's their most that child is their most precious gift, and they are trying to get what's best for them. And you have to help kind of co-parent in certain ways with them to understand what are they getting at home, how do you balance it at the pool. Talk to us about how you do that. I think every club sport in America is probably navigating. I am a parent, so I know how psycho parents can be, to use the term psycho.
Yeah.
But we put a lot of we have a lot of hopes and dreams. Most of the time they're coming from our kids, and then we share them with them. Sometimes it's coming from us, and maybe the kids take to them. How do you navigate that on a daily basis?
Well, I think, and you're right. The first thing is that we say to the staff all the time, and we don't always get it right. Like, when you're dealing with people, with kids and with parents and with, other coaches as well. But I think the message that we try to give out as a staff is that, look, the parents just want what's best for their kid. And whatever path they're going down because they feel that opportunity is under threat. And that's our starting point. And I think if we go in with that starting point, it allows us to oftentimes soften some of those initial communications. So instead of jumping straight in and dealing with what might be the hot moment, trying to take a step back and trying to go in a little bit softer and really just calm things down and then really talk about what actually the issue is.
Yeah.
Because quite often the issues in the moment are, the sum of a load of things going on being brought to the boil. And sometimes we just have to be able to, just soften that approach, go in and try to actually talk to them around what the problem is. We also we tell the parents all the time, if you are concerned about your child from an emotional point of view, from a developmental point of view, you pick up the phone and you call us and you let us know if you're comfortable. Let us know what's going on, because any information we have around some other things that are going on in their lives allows us to coach more appropriately for that individual in the moment. By the same token, we tell them in terms of the technical side of the sport and the performance side of the sport, we don't have conversations with them around that.
Right.
Because it's not an even playing field. We keep them up to date on what's going on, but we don't necessarily engage in that. And I think that's something that's really helped us, is over time being consistent with that message. And I do feel then, especially as the kids get more invested in the program, that parents, I would hope they feel more comfortable if something was not going well, that they'd reach out and let us know. And I said, in those moments where emotions are high and things get heightened, our goal is always to try to keep the fact that they're only looking out for their kids at the center of what we're doing. So we try to go in a little bit softer. Doesn't always mean that the end result is any different. But I feel like, at least if that's our intent, we're doing our part of it as best we can.
I want to jump into the idea, burnout in across youth sports, and what I'll define as burnout is kids leaving sports earlier than they should. And I'm hearing the statistics in soccer and many sports where kids leave the sport before they get to high school. And you and I have had a couple of conversations, I think, about the idea of burnout. And burnout when I was younger, Wahoos in particular, used to be like, oh, your kid's going to get burnt out swimming there. It's all yardage and this and that. How do you maintain, because I think burnout is actually a mental fatigue or a stress that it's like, this is no longer fun. How do you navigate that with kids and with parents?
So I am a big believer, and I totally agree with you. I think burnout is an emotional state of mind,
right?
Not a physical state of mind. And again, there's nothing is always absolute 100% of the time.
Yeah.
Are there kids that physically burn out doing anything in life? Absolutely, of course there is. Are there kids that get academically burned out? Of course there is. But the majority of the time, the issue isn't the physical load that the kids are undertaking. It's the emotional stress. It's that line between the pressure they're under, and that pressure turns into stress. And that stress then becomes a load that makes the activity, and quite probably their whole life,
not fun. And
I hate that word fun, in terms of everything, because I think it's more enjoyment and purpose and drive and, a passion for what you're doing. Because I think that's one of the messages.
I accept that correction. We just recently talked about joy versus fun, so I'm cool with that.
Because life isn't fun all the time, but life should always be purposeful and enjoyable and have its moments that are absolutely fun. But it's not also our job at the swimming pool to entertain the kids and make sure they're having a grand old time. Every time they come to the pool. So I think it's that emotional burden. So when I look at young kids, maybe as they're very early on in their journey and they're opting out, I quite often look at the stress that the parents are probably under. And I think that's a huge part of why we're seeing, maybe at that kind of 12 and under, 10 and under stage of lives, why we're seeing so much transition between sports. People call it dropout. I think there's just a lot more transitioning happening between sports than there used to be at that kind of younger level. And like I see it at home, with Kleena, with my wife, we have 3 boys. We have a 7-year-old and a 6-year-old, and the talk about trying to expose them to as many things as possible. It's really hard. It's really hard to do that. and to do it in a meaningful way where they're getting exposed to something that they can actually figure out if it's what they want to do. Because you have these, seasonal things that go on for 6 or 8 weeks.
Yeah.
6 weeks is nothing in a
blip.
kid's life. Yeah. So what I see with the young kids is there's a lot more, I think, transitioning of sports happening as they hop between a load of different things. And I actually don't think it's the kids that are burning out. I think it's the parents that are burning out. It was, and again, I see it a bit more now, and it's hard. It's hard getting, because most households probably have 2 working families. And you've got multiple children doing multiple different things. It's a huge load to take on. Driving around and getting from A to B and then from C to D and then back home to take care of everything else is really difficult.
Yeah.
So I think that's a huge part. I think it's actually the stress the parents are under. When you transition out of that, so what we try to do at Wahoos, what we're trying to do at the moment is reevaluate our offering. But, because one of our purposes is we want as many young people to get exposed to the sport of competitive swimming as possible, because we think it's amazing.
Yeah.
And it's not going to be for everybody, but the more people that get exposed to it, I think the better place society will be. Now, if they get that same offering from soccer or from football, whatever, that's also equally amazing. But we're in the swim business, and that's where we can help and support them. So I think that's what's happening at that younger. So we're trying to develop programming that meets that kind of changing societal need. When you look at that kind of 10 and under age group, parents want loads of different exposures to loads of different things. And how do we, as a program, offer meaningful content, and as a business, still survive and thrive in that space?
Yeah.
And it's a different model. So trying to have more flexible groups with flexible attendance options, on different days and at different times is something we try to do there, to try to keep some of those transitional families, to give them the ability to say, yes, we'll stay involved, because it's really hard for them. As they move up through the program, and we look at the kids, if you're kind of talking about 11-year-old up, maybe until they get into high school, that's probably the biggest risk of kids then dropping out and not doing anything else. Because they might have made a commitment to do 1 or 2 things. And if they don't follow through on it, their ability to go back and do something else at a meaningful level mightn't be as accessible as it was when they were younger. So really, that's the age group that we really try to dive into the programming that we offer, and making sure that the things we spoke about around compassion, that we're true to them. And that if we see a kid under stress, the onus, just like I said, it's okay for the parents to reach out to us. We've got to reach out to the parents and let them know what we're seeing, because the parents might be seeing the same thing, but think they're only seeing it in one certain space in their life.
Yeah.
They mightn't see it at the swimming pool as well, or they might know about it because, young kids don't like to talk to their parents. So if we see those things and we try to reach out to the parents and let them know that, hey, this is what we're observing, we wanted to share with you, and we're here to help. We'd love you to come in and have a chat with us. And I think talking fixes most things in life. So really our goal with dealing with that emotional stress is just trying to open those lines of communication to, talk to the kids about it, to let them know that it's okay.
Yeah.
Let them know that we can make adjustments and adaptations and offer them support, and open the lines of communication at home as well, so that they know that we're here also. We care deeply and passionately about the kids. And if you open those lines of communication, it mightn't fix this situation. It will absolutely help it.
Yeah.
And to me, that's a good enough starting point. And I think if you manage that emotional load on the kids, that dropout becomes a lot less. Because one of the other goals is maybe it is too much for a specific kid. Well, where else can we find a home for them that they can have a meaningful experience that's going to reduce the level of stress and pressure on them?
Yeah.
I think that the onus is on us as coaches and as a program to do that for the kids. I think if we do that, it's not perfect, but I think we're being proactive in addressing the real world challenges that kids are facing.
All right. We talked a lot about the kids and the athletes. You are also a leader, and you're a leader of other coaches. You're a leader of the entire organization, and you're a leader of all these kids. what are the leadership lessons you're learning about yourself and running an organization that have been helpful to you?
I think one of the lessons is looking at it for what it is. We spoke earlier about the youth sports space.
Yeah.
That's been really important shift that I've had to make as well. Over time, I'm in my 8th season, with Wahoos, and it takes time to really understand and appreciate that. So I think that's been really important. The other side of that youth sports space is that what we're trying to do is we are trying to be competitive on the national level.
Right.
We talk about kids showing their best and give them the opportunity to show their best. We believe that the kids in this local area have the ability and the opportunity to be the best of the best. So trying to do that, while at the same time looking after 650 swimmers, trying to find that balance. So part of the leadership lesson is getting away from the black and white, and being in the gray most of the time, and leading from the gray. Rather, I think sometimes, from my personal point of view, you might be leading from the black a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And you set up a lot of absolutes. We have very few rules at Wahoos, very few, and that can, at times, it can infuriate staff and it can infuriate parents. But I firmly believe that if we're going to be true to respecting each individual, we can't back ourselves into a corner, because again, kids are meant to make mistakes. Staff are meant to make mistakes. Parents are allowed to make mistakes. And so the biggest leadership lesson is, as I said, understanding the space that we're living in that youth sports space, and being true to it. And then also, just from a leadership point of view, leading from the gray, and trying to do that. And then the other thing I think I've really tried to take on, and this might just be because of my personality and that, but I believe in quiet leadership. There's the old saying with parents had about kids is they should be seen but not heard.
Yeah.
I think leaders should be heard but not seen. So it's how do I try to get the message out there, without it being about me, because it's not about me.
Right.
It's about the kids. The kids are the reason why. So I really try to embrace that and try to give the staff opportunities to communicate with the groups that they're working with. But I think that's also, it's good for the kids and the parents, because they're the people they're building the relationship with.
Right.
Not me. I have a relationship with a lot of people in the organization, but not everybody.
Right.
So trying to empower the staff to be able to do that. And the biggest thing I've really tried to take on, and again, you're all based on our previous experiences, but from my previous professional experience was, try to lead with patience, positivity, and purpose. And whenever I'm trying to make decisions, I try to reflect on those three things and how am I being true to those things. And I think what flows out of that then is you just try to pick your battles, because not everything that happens today matters.
Yeah. You touched on the idea of you're serving, our kids are competing at the most national level. When you look at Audrey Darabo and Henry McFadden, I mean, that is, and programmatically the Sean Killians and Peter Wrights of the history of Wahoos, the very top end of the sport, down to a learn to swim program. I believe the brand and the excitement of a youth, of a kid. I remember 1996, Peter Wright making the Olympic trials, feeling like I'm a Wahoo, he's a Wahoo, and like feeling the Olympic dream's not just a dream, but it just became a reality. And you used the term, it only takes one. I've heard you say that. And like with that one, it really can inspire the entire organization. We were talking about Katie Huff before we got on the show, who's a board member at Wahoos. I remember when North Baltimore Aquatic Club would have a huge gala. They would empty the pool. They'd have a gala in the pool to really celebrate the Olympic spirit inside of that club. And it really built the entire North Baltimore Aquatic Club brand. Obviously, you had Michael Phelps and that's a once in a lifetime or once in ever phenom. How do you balance building this brand at the very top end of the sport while continuing to serve and be aware and listen to what's going on at the entry level of the sport?
It's a really good question. One of the things we've tried to do is, because I think that success garners its own natural level of attention.
Yeah.
So we've tried not to overly lean into that. Like we are incredibly proud of the kids. We're incredibly proud of all the kids.
Yeah.
And all that they do. So the ones at the top level of performance, whether that be at the national level or even if you look around locally, that goes on, and South Jersey has a vibrant swim community beyond United States swimming.
Summer swimming.
Summer Swim High School.
Yeah.
And so there is a lot of natural attention that gets brought to those people who are achieving that level of success naturally. And we support that, and we get involved in that. We try not to add to it. And so that we can remain focused on celebrating the successes of everybody in the program.
That's great.
And again, I think, I don't know if it's a different approach or not. My personal opinion is, in today's world, especially with social media, that the focus is too much on creating a perception of what's going on, and sometimes it masks the reality of what's actually going on. And I think if you look at a lot of really high performing organizations that people look up to and really admire, time isn't always that kind to them. So I think with that in mind, we really try to keep our focus on the bigger picture. And that includes giving the athletes at the top the opportunity to show their best. We are incredibly invested in that. We invest a lot of time and resource into it. But they get that celebration naturally.
Yeah.
And it's great because it's naturally then falls back onto us as well. So we really try to focus our energy and our time, because that's limited, onto looking after everything else. And I think that's really, really important, because the kids that I coach, there's 35 kids in the group that I directly coach. Every single one of those 35 kids is as important to me, and their success and happiness is as important to me.
Yeah.
And I don't want that to get lost ever in my coaching and in my leading of a group like that. Because again, I've had experience, excuse me, I had experience in a high performance unit, and my personal experience in it, and my personal opinion on it, reflecting back on it, is that not everybody in that wider environment was always true to their core values, myself included. So I try not to repeat that
Got it.
process again.
You've been at Wahoos for 8 years. What is a standout lesson learned in this? I can't believe it's been 8 years, first of all.
Tell me about
But in the tenure of stewarding that organization as the leader, what's a great leadership lesson learned?
I think some of the things we spoke about already. The biggest thing to me is that nothing that happens today is going to define our long-term success, and being able to be maybe a bit truer to having the patience, to not jump in with my 2 feet all the time. Because you have a want to fix the situation, you might also have a high level of emotional response to a situation. And I think my biggest lesson is really to try to be a bit, I don't know if calm is not, I don't think calm is the right word, but maybe a bit more emotionless.
Discerning
to some of the things going on. And I think it's definitely served me well from a personal point of view.
Yeah.
And I think it served the program well as well. Like, because so many of the problems in youth sport are emotional moments managed badly.
Totally.
And trying not
emotional
to have
moments probably reacted to instead of responded to.
100%. Yeah, it's a great way of saying it. So we try. My biggest lesson is I try not to react.
Yeah, that's good. Um, Switching to some rapid fire questions. Any must-read books in your personal library, or books that have really shaped your coaching and leadership philosophy?
Always, and like we said about there's so many out there.
Yeah.
In today's world, The Power Habit is a book I go back to often. A Carol Dweck's book on, and I'm going to forget the name now.
I am too.
It's either great or it's one of those buzzwords, but an excellent book. The Five Dysfunctions of a Team. There's a book I'm reading at the moment. I can't even remember the name of it. Something about a bus. The something bus.
Okay.
It was recommended at a coaching conference in September, and I got it there at Christmas time. And just the name of it's escaping me. But I think with all those things, just that market, I love that marketplace. It's so overcrowded.
Yeah.
That I think the biggest thing I take with whenever I'm consuming information is that I could read a 300-page book, and if I get 3 pages of
Value.
great content out of it, that's awesome. That doesn't mean that it wasn't a good read. So, and that's probably something that I've changed as well. I used to read something and say, well, that bit of it wasn't great, so the whole thing must be
right,
not great. I've tried to change my mindset on that and consume things with more of an open mind, and look at those things. Steve Magnus, who is a coach.
He's amazing.
He is amazing. He's a track and field coach. He was involved as a whistleblower in the Albert Salazar.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And now he was his assistant coach. He was the whistleblower on some of that stuff. But he's come out of it with a whole, he coaches at University of Houston, I believe. But he comes out with a whole load of content with his partner, who his name is also escaping, Brad.
I think Brad Stolberg.
Yeah, Brad Stolberg, who we had speak at the American Swim Coaches Association conference a couple of years ago. They produce content in book form, but also, in a weekly or monthly content form. That's just absolutely incredible stuff. And it's amazing. The thing I really like about that stuff is how simple they keep it.
I agree.
And just makes it digestible and relevant.
I think that why I love reading or consuming, one, it's the same thing that you're trying to do for kids, which is be the voice of confidence and positivity. And I feel like when I consume more of the positive side of leadership is hard. All of the stress that you're dealing with or navigating, and the many emotional issues that, especially in youth sports, that they're just high stakes emotionally, even though they're not high stakes in many circumstances.
They're the highest stakes in that moment for the people involved. That's the hard thing.
I know. And you want to meet people, back to the idea of compassion, you want to meet people there with compassion, even though you may want to meet them there with defensiveness you're looking at this different or wrong. My point in all of that is when you are dealing with the noise of the world, trying to raise a family at home, trying to run a business, and trying to be a positive coach. To me, books on leadership, one, they take away the loneliness of the role, and two, they fill you with positivity. And like, if I just get a single simple line that becomes a mantra, like "do hard things" from Steve Magnus's title, it helps.
Helps massively, because we had a staff meeting on Tuesday, and I shared with the staff 2 studies that came out. One was from the Center for Safe Sport, and the other one was just something I came across online. There's I think it's the Sports Coaching Parent is their handle on Twitter or X or whatever it's called now. And but both the studies were about the biggest reason basically for dropout in coaching is parents. And it might be, but I think if we looked beyond that and said, what is those interactions eliciting in people that's forcing them to drop out? I think it's the emotional load of being a coach in today's world is just ginormous. And the emotional load of being a leader is is the hardest thing. Like the hardest thing in coaching, and I think it changes at different times of your life as well. But now, like I've got three young children. I've got a 7-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 2-year-old. And so even when I came to Wahoos, I had one son. He was like
Just
3 or
born.
4 months old. Yeah. So that's you move through life with these things as well. But I think the emotional load. So I go into the office, and you've got to take on the emotional load of the staff,
Yeah.
positive and negative.
Yep.
That's the job of being a leader is to take all the pain, give none of it. So you got to take that on board. Then you got to go on deck, which is when you've got to be performing. That's really the most important part of your day. But you've got to take on the emotional load of the 35 kids that are in the water and potentially the assistants that are on deck with you as well. And then going home with, at best, a half full tank.
Yeah.
In terms of your emotional energy. I think that's the hardest thing. So I think I read those things about the parental interactions, and I agree with it. Because I hear people talk about it,
Right.
and I see it happening with peers of mine. But also, I think it's what are those interactions causing in coaches? And I think, like we spoke about pressure, stress earlier on, it's creating an incredible amount of stress. And I think the stress is the thing that actually pulls people away, not the interaction with the parents.
Yeah.
It's the stress that is the thing that breaks you.
Yeah.
And being under a sustained amount of stress. So it goes back to our thing of just trying to defuse things as much as possible. And like I tell you, just to go back into compassion thing, one of the things I thought about is trying to have kids be compassionate about themselves. Most important thing. And that's part of the job. The hardest thing, and I found, I don't know if this is unique to South Jersey, I definitely didn't experience it back home.
Yeah.
But is the lack of compassion that parents have for other people's children is unbelievable. And most of the time, most of the stressful interactions we have with parents is not about their own children. It's about the performance, behavior, actions of other children. And that is, so when we talk about compassion, one of my biggest messages out to parents is please talk about and treat other people's children like you would want your child to be treated as well.
I'm looking up this quote by George Bush because I think it's so relevant right now and I want to get it right. And it's appropriate. Too often we judge others by their worst examples while judging ourselves by our best intentions.
That's a good one.
Isn't it?
I'll steal that off you.
And I think that is human nature. Is like, oh, I didn't mean to do that, but why did you do that?
Yeah. No, it's so true. And just the other side of it is that the parents are also under a huge amount of pressure and stress.
Yeah.
And youth sport in the United States, because of what's on the line, it's a double-edged sword because so one of our biggest goal at Wahoos, if you're going to stay the course throughout the whole program
Yep.
and go all the way in it, is that we want the kids to go to college.
Compete in
I want them
college.
to compete in college. But the hook is that I want them to get an opportunity, an educational opportunity that is otherwise, without swimming, unattainable for them.
It's a differentiator to their educational opportunities.
So no disrespect, there's amazing schools around
Everywhere,
the South Jersey area. But if you're just a local kid in school, that's probably the path that you'd go down. Whereas we can use the sport of swimming to open up doors to them to get to places that they never would have gotten to without it.
Right.
Whether it's academically, whether it's financially, all those things. So that's our actual mission, our actual goal for the kids isn't for them to win a medal at the World Championships. Our actual goal with them all is to open up doors that are otherwise unattainable.
Yeah.
And that path to show your best looks pretty similar for everybody. Some people have a bit more natural talent
Genetics.
than others. Yeah. And then you've got to run that race when you're given that opportunity to lead it as well. But what it takes to win a medal at the World Championships, and what it takes for someone else just to be able to open up the doors to a school that they weren't otherwise going to get to, is the same.
Yeah.
It takes what it takes. And so that's our real reason for doing it. I think the changes in the college landscape, we've got to stay laser focused on that point.
Yeah.
Because the money that's going to come into swimming ain't going to make a difference in people's lives. So we've got to keep focused on that. But the hard thing for the parents is that maybe part of opening up another door might actually mean that they have to invest more money.
Right.
And that's
even
hard.
more expensive. Yeah.
It's even more expensive. So what we might see is a kid might take, and I don't like using this word, but a lesser opportunity,
Right.
because the financial burden on the families is lowered.
Yeah.
And that's a really important factor. We have to be respectful of that. So like I look at some swim programs and there's this push to get their kids into Power 4 schools, or how many, in North Jersey there's a huge push to get them into the Ivies and stuff like this. And we don't do any of that, because we have to be respectful of what we don't know.
All of the other variables.
All the other variables that we don't know and don't need to know, and it's none of our business.
Right.
So once they're getting an educational opportunity, and education and academics are not the same thing. I'm not looking for them to have an academic experience in college. This would be my experience. Like, I'm an economics grad.
Right.
What a waste of time that was. But it wasn't. It wasn't. It was a great time in my life. And I learned loads. Maybe a small bit about economics, but a whole load about just other stuff.
Yeah.
That stood with me for that time. So we want those educational opportunities. And I think being a student athlete in college is an educational opportunity, because it just brings you on a different path for those 4 years and a different experience. And, I think there's plenty of time post-college to go do some of the social things that, everyone's in a rush to do, straight away. So, but we have to be respectful of that burden that are on the families as well. So it's that double-edged sword we have here in our system, where we have the money focus, and we have the education focus, and they kind of go hand in hand, but kind of sometimes they don't, and that's a hard balance to find. And I feel really, when I look at the kids going through this process, I feel for them, I feel for their parents.
Yeah.
And so when you talk about those interactions we have with parents, that's on my mind as well. That even probably at the age of 11 or 12, there are some people that are already thinking about that, because they need to think about it. And we should be respectful and empathetic towards that.
It's a good point. What didn't we cover that you want to make sure we hit?
I'm an open book.
I know you are.
No one likes talking about swimming, so we don't have to actually talk about swimming.
Let's talk about it. I mean, we're hitting the Winter Olympics. How does the USA swimming landscape look right now, 2 years out from Olympics? Are there major trends or shifts happening, or do we remain a dominant force in the world landscape?
I don't think the US has been the dominant force it was for the past two quads, past two Olympic cycles. And not necessarily because of anything going on internally, but I think what's going on externally. You look like a country like Ireland. Like we came home with 2 medals from the last Olympics. Daniel Whiffen beat Bobby Fink to win gold in the 800 free, and Mona McSharry won a bronze medal in the 100 breaststroke. And that mightn't be sustainable and repeatable success for Ireland. It might take everything they have to go into that process to get there. And then they might have to go back down and go back up again. But when Ireland is going through that rebuild cycle, another country of similar size will step in there and take that gold and bronze medal. So I think there's a huge amount of smaller nations that have invested financially into high performance sport that are producing medals internationally now. And that's taking medals away from Team USA. I think the biggest shift that I've seen internationally going on in the swim landscape. And then the other thing that's going on is that as swimming's gotten older, as they stay in it longer, the NC2A isn't the peak level of an athlete's career. So
Yeah.
the US has to and is finding ways to transition kids post their NC2A careers to stay involved at a high level to keep going. So I think that's been a change in landscape domestically as well. And I do think as well, and this is just my personal opinion, but as the college landscape has changed,
Yeah.
the college coaches have become much more focused on college swimming and maybe not as focused on international swimming. Not everywhere,
Right.
but I think certainly that lens has narrowed if you look at the NC2A as a whole. That would be my opinion. I'm sure there'd be a bunch of college coaches that would
Argue with you.
argue with me, but that's something that I see in going on. And that's definitely had an impact on the depth of performance going on in the United States.
So
as well.
said differently, they have to worry about their job and their team's performance and keeping their swimmers there and being competitive, as opposed to helping their swimmers go to the highest level of the sport.
Yes, and I think the yard swimming and
Yeah.
which the collegiate swimming championships have done, and like they do work together really well.
Yeah.
But you can also be more focused on just one than the other, and I think that's definitely happened. The huge thing going on in the United States swimming, there was a huge change in leadership last year.
Right.
At all different levels of sport. There's a new CEO, there's a new national team director, and a whole new national team division staff down below that. And it's been like part of being we spoke about leadership earlier. I think part of being a leader in a youth sport volunteer organization is that we lead by example and we have to give back of our time. So I try to get involved in those things, and I sit in a committee with United States Swimming and the Senior Development Committee, and so we get to be involved in some of the conversations and appreciate and understand some of the challenges that the national governing body is facing as well. And it's been really interesting and hugely beneficial to see that. So that change in leadership, the most important thing whenever there's a change in leadership is that you give them time, patience,
Yeah.
and support and freedom to be
Yeah.
able to figure things out. And so I think it's on a really good path for that. But the rest of the world is uber competitive, investing more money. There are national governing bodies out there that are investing more money directly into swimming than the United States are doing. What the United States always had is they had the collegiate system investing
Feeding it,
also
yeah.
and feeding it. And so that's definitely a challenge that's out there at the moment. The big talk is the rivalry with Australia and all the rest of it. I'd be more worried about the rest of the world and the rest of the world grouping together
Right.
to make up another big nation that you've got to compete with.
Yeah.
So that's definitely something that's going on. But I think giving back to it, and now I worked for a national governing body, and I have the scars emotionally and socially from being an employee of an organization like that.
Really.
Oh yeah. There was I was a coach, and then I became an employee of an organization, and it changed. I'm not criticizing people, but like it changes their interactions and the way they view you. And no joke, as soon as I was out of that organization, within 48 hours, I was back involved in 3 WhatsApp groups I didn't know even existed, because I now no longer worked for the organization. And it's really hard. The thing I found and I wanted to take away from that is not to be a critic from the outside,
Yeah.
ever just giving out and complaining. I want to be part of the success and part of the process to success. And I think you do that by offering your support and your constructive criticism
Yeah.
directly into the organizations and help them do their jobs, because it's a really, really hard job.
It goes back to where we started, compassion.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a lot easier to criticize when you're not willing to pick up a piece of the problem.
No, it is. And one of the things I'm involved in is the American Swim Coaches Association is an organization. It's very dear to my heart at a personal level. And I had the opportunity to get involved in that a couple of years ago. I sit in the board of directors, and my biggest thing when I interact with coaches when they come with issues is we've got to walk the walk.
Yeah.
So if we're working in an organization, if we're working in our club program, college program, YMCA program, we have an expectation of how we want to be treated. Well, let's make sure we are also living that when we have to go outside our own organizations and how we interact and communicate and treat other people, because that's really, really important. But just generally, I think trying to be kinder.
That's great. Any favorite quotes in your repertoire?
My favorite quote by the philosopher John Locke is, "It only ends once. Everything else is just progress." It's true in life.
It is.
But it's true in, I think, each endeavor that we go on as well. My other favorite quote or concept is just "no line on the horizon." I say the story before. U2 came out with an album, and the album cover is "No line on the horizon," and the album cover is just white, and it's
forever.
And there's a little kind of beach thing in that, and I'm not a huge U2 fan. I think nobody in Ireland is. I think it's everybody outside of Ireland that really likes them. But the concept really stuck with me.
Yeah.
And like our training program, our development programs at Wahoos are called It's the Horizon program. Right. And it was a program I was involved in back home with the Irish Institute of Sport, was the Horizon Coaches program. And it was all built around that same concept of that you can do anything you want. And so if you talk about favorite quotes, I say this to the kids, specifically talking around high school season a lot.
Yeah.
But you can do anything you want in life, but you just can't do everything.
Yeah, I've heard that before. If you could have dinner with 3 people that are alive, who would they be?
Oof. I think in the wider world of sport, and that I'd love to sit down with Sir Alex Ferguson, because I'm a Man United fan, and very successful individual. I'd love to sit down. He's not alive anymore. I was going to say Steve Jobs, but
dead or alive, you're allowed to.
Oh, you are?
Yeah.
Right. I'd love to sit down with Steve Jobs. I think it was one of my favorite reads ever was Walter Isaacson's biography on Jobs.
Yeah.
Because it was warts and all. And I think it really, we spoke earlier about sometimes the perception.
Yeah.
When you lift the lid and it's not always the same. That doesn't mean that they're bad folks either.
No, I agree.
It just means there's more. And I'll give a controversial one because everyone loves the Eagles around here. I'd love to sit down with Bill Belichick. And again, I think in all those guys, I think it's flawed leadership.
Yeah.
Sorry, maybe it's great leadership and flawed characters. Aren't we all?
Yeah, totally.
So,
all of the imperfections.
And I think that's one of the really hard things, BG. I'm sure you see it in life as well as Dan. One person's negative experience with you doesn't mean that you're a negative person.
So back to what you said about the kids, like you might have failed in this situation, but you're not a failure.
Yeah.
And to me, that is, I think it's Abraham Lincoln that said it, but the ability to go from failure to failure without losing a sense of purpose or a sense of enthusiasm. And I think that is what leaders are called to do. I think that you do have a heavy and important job, because I think that sports are so co-curricular to the development of our kids. And it's the whole concept of friendly strife. Like development of leaders at West Point was you had to be an athlete to learn the lessons that you get on a sports field. But I think our kids, the grit, the determination, the focus, the goal setting, the self-compassion, all of that we can learn through sports. I think you're doing an amazing job. And I love giving you the space to talk about it, because I do think that, or I'm sure there are plenty of people that may not know all of the things that you are trying to do or the trade-offs that you're constantly making, sometimes you're not jumping into that kid's issue with 2 feet because you're letting that assistant coach or that younger coach develop and learn how to deal with it. So I think this has been a fun conversation.
It's been the only I'd add, like it is the nuance of all these things, and that the most important thing for kids. And I don't know if I'm interested as my kids start going through the school journey, if they get this in school or not. I'm not so sure that they are getting it anymore. I think youth sport is the last bastion of discipline and challenging environments.
I agree.
And why it's so important that we create that safe place for them to fail,
Yeah.
so they can learn the lessons that they otherwise mightn't get.
100% agree. Well, it's been fun.
Awesome.
I've enjoyed the conversation. Hey, everybody, if you're enjoying the show, if you're involved in youth sports, if you know somebody's involved in youth sports, or maybe it's a coach struggling to figure out kind of how to make sense of what may feel like stress or burnout or too much, do us a favor, like it, subscribe, shoot it over to somebody. Please spread the word. And until next time, have a great week and a great weekend.